Hello and welcome to Access Community Television. I'm Molly CARON.
And I'm IMTIAZ POPAT.
We will bring you stories lived and life played this hour. Eugene CRAIN, the First Nations commentator of entertainment, has a special guest, Murray Porter. And we also have updates on stories that we've been following here on Access TV for the past year.
Yeah, we have an update from Wendy Peterson from this SRO collaborative.
She has been letting us know that the collaboratives had some big wins this spring with the West Hotel. They now have better management, which is keeping up the living conditions for people there. And that has advocacy that has spread to the Lions Hotel, where they now have heat and hot water for the first time in 4 years. So media is working.
And the tenants from the Regent Hotel are doing a class action suit with the city of Vancouver against the notorious slumlords.
Excellent. Hopefully this will slow the rate of homelessness. They actually want to rewrite a city bylaw so that it is easier to fine landlords that aren't keeping a place up to standards and also keeping rent at a reasonable rate.
And the SRO collaborative is actually doing an SRO school and looking for tenants to attend the school so they can be sustainable to fight against these slumlords. And look out for a poster on that one.
Staying one step ahead, just like a survivor. Speaking of survivors, the Survivors Totem Pole Project is coming to fruition, and it will be mounted on the 5th of November in Pigeon Park in a circle of matriarchs and elders and drums. And this is to stand in visible resistance to the systemic racism that is still in our community.
But first is Kelly REABURN with Tim Lewis on transit accessibility.
This is Access Television. I'm Kelly REABURN, committed to people with disabilities and accessibilities. I'm here to talk about the TransLink fare gates and the HEIDUR taxi service system. Since April, TransLink has closed all fare gates along the SkyTrain stations and C bus terminals while attendant is available. But what happens if there is no attendant when the fare gates are closed? Former Vancouver councillor Tim Lewis was delegated at the Vancouver quarterly meeting in March, and he's here to talk about the impacts on accessibilities. Tim Lewis is in his studio right now. Hi, Tim. How's it going?
Good afternoon, Kelly. Thank you very much for having me here today.
It's been a pleasure. There has been a lot of talk about issues on SkyTrain fare gates closed with no attendance. Can you explain what's happening with the fare gates and what's going on 5 years from now through TransLink?
Well, first of all, the problem, and then I'm very happy to tell you the solution. Problem is that for folks with limited arm function, the need to tap the compass card to get into or out of public transit just doesn't work. And so for folks like me, we were literally shut out of the system. I'm very pleased to let you know, I met with the TransLink CEO, Kevin Desmond. He's a breath of fresh air, and within a few days of that meeting, he committed $5 million to a technological fix. What they will be coming out with, not too far down the road, are new compass cards for folks that cannot tap. It will have a little chip in the card, an RFID chip, radio frequency ID. I won't need to remove the card from my pocket. There'll be a little radio frequency from that chip, and as I go by the station, it will pick it up and open up the gate.
You went through HEIDUR and through the service that you rely on, a day-to-day service. Now, HEIDUR is a service that you have to call in advance to pick you up or to pick other passengers in arrangements to their meetings or their doctor's appointments or that kind of situation. Now, I've been to some of the TransLink board meetings as well, and some of the wheelchair peoples were there on their concerns on the issue on HEIDUR service and the taxi fare savers service. What has the problem concerned on these issues?
Well, as you know, for 27 years, the HEIDUR operator was North America's only co-op made up of HEIDUR users. And so the HEIDUR users were literally in the driver's seat. I'm sad to say that not all good things go on forever. And after 27 years, the co-op did not succeed in winning the bid. TransLink puts this service out to bid every year. A private, for-profit, American company won the bid. Users and workers at HEIDUR are very unhappy with this private, for-profit American firm. That swooshing sound that you hear is approximately $5 million of profit leaving the region every year and fattening a Houston, Texas bank account. We say if that money was put to work here in the region, we could increase HEIDUR levels at no cost to you, the taxpayer. Let's bring the service in-house, just like Coast Mountain.
What would you like to see more on accessibility on transit in the future?
Well, first of all, we need to raise HEIDUR service levels so that we can reduce what we call trip turndowns. When a person calls in, we can advance to request a ride, and the system is already booked up. That person is sentenced to house arrest for the day in question. So we're going to get those service levels up higher. We're going to keep working with positive people like Kevin Desmond to make technology our slave. Use technology to make the system fully accessible. We do those two things, and we're all winners.
I was speaking with Tim Lewis, the former councillor for the city of Vancouver, on an update on the Bus Pass program. Since September 1st, all service on through the Bus Pass program has been changed. As for myself, I have begun getting some money for $25 onto the PWD, which is the Persons with Disabilities Bus Pass program. And a lot of changes are on the way through the PWD. So if you want more information about the Bus Pass program, you can give the ministry a call at 1-866-866-0800 for more detail on the Bus Pass program and the disability with assisted transportation. That is all for the Access Television. We've got some more coming up on our program. I thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Kelly REABURN. Hope to see you again soon.
Welcome to Access Television. I'm GUNARGIE O'Sullivan, and I'm very glad to be here with you in mind, body, and soul. Speaking of which, we would like to stay healthy physically, mentally, and emotionally. And how can we do that? We can eat well, and that's what we're going to talk about today with BAHRAM HEIDUR, who is from the Persian community and currently opened up a brand new cafe, which we introduced to you a few shows back, called the CAVEMAN Cafe. And he's here to tell us all about his menu, where we can find him, and when. BAHRAM, welcome to Access Television.
Thank you. So our address is 88 West Pender Street. We are part of Tinseltown International Village. Our opening hours Monday to Saturday is 11 to 10 at night. Sunday 12 to 4 in the afternoon.
Good hours.
So these are the hours. The idea behind Caveman Cafe is about healthy eating. Caveman obviously dealing with paleo diet. Paleo diet means no grain, also eating meat which is not medicated. The chicken we use is free range, and we use wild salmon. So this is the idea behind the food, because as you know that they use lots of antibiotic they give to animals now, which is really bad for you.
Yeah.
So the kind of meat we give, we produce here is non-medicated, grass-fed. Also, most of our food is meat or salmon or chicken served with fresh salad. The sauces we make are homemade. We add no additive, no sugar, no preservative, no MSG in our food. So what you eat is basically very, very healthy. And most of my customers are, as they say, they feel really light after they eat and very, you know, active, you know. So you break down your diet into, say, eating salmon in the afternoon and have beef for lunch, you know. And the other kind of food we offer is for people who are diabetics. Obviously, if you're vegetarian, doesn't matter what if you're vegetarian or meat eater, whenever you eat bread, bread turns into sugar. So we have produced this bread from cassava and almond and avocado oil, which is actually good for diabetics. So you eat the bread and we make a pizza or hamburger from that.
Beautiful. And the thing that I love about the Caveman is it costs half the price as a fast food restaurant, which is amazing.
Exactly. And
Yes.
the other thing I enjoy about the meals is how you mix the spices in and how the spices are good for your body. And you know, it's I think it's a really healthy way of living.
Well, what we thought was, obviously, wealthy people can eat healthy food. So it's about students, about working people, about the community that don't earn as much money. So our prices are very competitive, under $10. So you can eat really healthy food for under $10, which is basically, if you make it at home, it's going to cost you more. We have a big family table there. It's all part of the community work and our environment struggle to make our, give a future to.
Well, it's been awesome talking to you, Barham, and I thank you for bringing your good taste to our community at the Tinseltown at 88 West Pender, and I encourage you to check it out. His hours are really good, and his food is excellent. So let's have a bite.
Hello, my name is Eugene CRAIN, and you're watching Access Community TV. This is Hot Topics, Indigenous Access. I'm so excited today. We have a very special guest in the house, Murray Porter. Murray Porter, Mohawk from Six Nations and Juno winner for Aboriginal album of the Year, Songs Lived and Live Played. Through his blues, he tells the Aboriginal side of history with a mixture of country, blues, and humor. Murray is a self-taught singer, songwriter, and piano player who spent the last 30 years playing the blues throughout the world, spreading his unique style of foot-stomping, hand-clapping, native blues piano. He has been compared to the likes of Dr. John, Joe Cocker, Leon Russell, Elton John, and Delbert McClinton. Murray Porter is an independent artist and working on his second album. Welcome, Murray.
Thanks for having me.
Murray, can you explain what being an independent artist and producing your own album means in today's world?
Well, there used to be a time when you could get a big contract and they would sign you to a record label and they'd give you a big chunk of money and you were like rock stars. But times have changed. And now the only people who get the money are the Biebers and the Beyoncés to make the videos and the albums. So the rest of us are left to our own devices. And luckily, social media has come to our rescue. And so many of us market our wares through social media, through Instagram, through Facebook, through Twitter. And that's the way we do things these days. And it only makes sense because we never had that access before. And now that things have changed and the tide has turned, we need to use that to our advantage. And we don't need the big record companies. We can do it on our own. I won a Juno recording an album that was recorded in my friend's spare bedroom. You don't need the fancy stuff. You can still make it in the music business.
Wow, that is difficult. Murray, you have shared the stage with Etta James, B.B. King, the Neville Brothers, Tom Cochrane, Burton Cummings, Marcia Ball, Pura Fay, Derek Miller, and the Funk Brothers. Any stories you want to share?
Well, my favorite one was I sang with Sam Moore from Sam and Dave, the Soul Man. Wow. And we got to sing together. And we really just hit it off. He really liked the way I sang, and we talked, and he's such a legend, and so it was a great meeting. I played with so many other great people, but we really hit it off, me and Sam Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. Good luck on your new album. And I think that you should always support your local musician, support someone who's putting out an album. And if you want to support Murray and his new album, please contact eBomberry at shaw.ca. Murray is also playing at the Ferry Pub on November 26th to help raise money for his new album, so please come and check that out.
Next up, we have Stephen Lytton interviewing his old friend Terry Hunter from the Vancouver Moving Theatre. They're here to talk about the Heart of the City Festival and what to look forward to.
Hi, my name is Stephen Lytton. I'm with Access Community Television. I have the honor of speaking with my friend Terry Hunter, who's the Executive Director of Vancouver Moving Theatre. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, Steve.
How is Vancouver Moving Theatre building bridges with Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people?
Yeah, we're based in the downtown east side, and we produce the downtown east side Heart of the City Festival, and we do a lot of community engaged productions with the residents of our community. And there's a very large Native population living in the downtown east side, most of whom have come from other territories around British Columbia, across Canada, and even down into the States. So through our community engaged work, we've worked with the Black community in our neighborhood, we've worked with the Japanese Canadian community, Ukrainian community, and one of the questions that we came up with was wondering why there's so many Native people living in the downtown east side. And so it was through that work that we began to work with Renai Morisseau and Rose Georgeson. And a number of years ago, we produced a show called Story Weaving, which you were in. And so that story explored that question about why and how it has come to be that there's so many Native people living in the downtown east side. And so that question really opened the door to the understanding, at least on my part, of the role of colonization, the impact of the residential schools, and the isolation and the lack of employment for people on the reserves, and also the disconnection to work opportunities in the fishing industry and the other employment opportunities across British Columbia. That work for us really opened up a whole door for us in terms of looking at how we can go deeper into this and understanding how that is part of the need now for Canada to change and the whole role of reconciliation. So we've continued to do this work about building bridges between Native and non-Native communities. And last spring of 2015, in partnership with the Roundhouse Community Centre and the City of Vancouver Board of Parks and Recreation, and Enderby Theatre Company, Runaway Moon Theatre Company in Enderby, and Jumblies Theatre in Toronto, we produced a symposium, and it's called Tracks. And the whole premise of the Tracks Symposium was profiling projects that have been created by Native and non-Native artists working in collaboration with community. And so we did this whole symposium last spring, and so we brought together artists who had done this work. And we're continuing to do this work today through the Downtown East Side Heart of the City Festival and other projects that we're doing.
So Terry, tell me about this year's festival and what features can we look at that is new this year, and some of the stuff that were done before. What can people keep on their calendar for this year's event?
And so specifically with this theme of building bridges between the Native and non-Native community, the theme of the festival this year is living on shared territory. And that's at once a recognition that the immigrant groups are living on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. It's also a recognition that within our community that there's different cultural groups, the Chinese community, the Japanese community, the Black community, the European community, that are all living together on the shared territory of the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. And specifically this year, we're doing a number of productions and programs and projects that really specifically address that theme. One of which is the Survivors Totem Pole. And this is a major project that the lead organization is the Sacred Circle Society, I believe the name is. And they've created a pole, survivor's pole, 27 feet high. It's going into Pigeon Park on Saturday, November 5th. So that's one of the major things that we're doing with our community.
Tell me, Terry, about your role as the artistic director of Vancouver Moving Theatre Festival.
So I work closely with Savannah Walling, who's the Associate Artistic Director of the festival, and Teresa Vandertooen, who's the Associate Artistic Producer. So the three of us work together. We're always in conversation with our community, and the community is coming to us with ideas and with issues that are important to the community. So we program in response to what the community is telling us.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming and speaking with us today about the Vancouver Moving Theatre Festival this year.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks, bro.
I'm here with Daniel Bissonette, outspoken 11-year-old, author of a new book called Daniel's Breakfast Burst. And
The Giving Child, to reconnect kids with nature.
And Daniel, you're here on a lovely, sunny, cloudy May 21st to march against Monsanto. And why?
Well, because what they're doing with our food is just wrong, and I don't want to protect the environment. I want to create a world where the environment doesn't need protecting.
Now, you told a story today about how you really admire ants. Can you tell a little bit of that story again?
Well, yeah, ants, they truly know how to farm. They've been doing it successfully for 130 million years, and I like that a lot about them, because they're not really like trying to use technology to reinvent stuff to make it easier to farm.
And they can move obstacles.
Yeah, they can move obstacles many times their size, because they understand the power of together.
And then if we think of ourselves as a kind of a group of a species that works together, do you think we could get a lot done?
Well, if we worked together and weren't as selfish as some of us are, then it would actually be like we'd actually be more civilized than we really are now.
And how can people buy your book?
Oh, they can buy it here at March Madness Film. They can buy it online. They go to my website, danielbissonette.com, and they can get the life-changing breakfast burst over an entire month of life-changing, delicious, fresh recipes. And then this one's to reconnect kids with nature.
Hi, this is IMTIAZ POPAT, and it's the 20th anniversary of the Vancouver Asian Film Festival. I have founder Barbara Lee here and festival director Grace Chin. So Barbara, tell us, how did it all start 20 years ago?
Oh gosh, I was very young and naive. But I really thought that there should be a place to show Asian films and diversity in storytelling. So I looked around and I didn't find any kind of film festival that had an Asian voice, so I thought I'd start it. And I got a bunch of friends, and we just didn't really realize how hard it would be, and we just plowed ahead and started talking to other film festivals like Seattle International Asian Film Festival and San Francisco International Asian American Film Festival and New York. And we just worked on their programming and then put the word out there. But back then it was fax machines and phone calls, no internet back then. So it was tough.
What are some of the highlights of the 20 years, Barbara?
Well, probably our biggest highlight is our first film we showed was Shopping for Fangs, which was directed by Justin Lin and Quentin Lee. And Justin Lin has gone off to become very successful with the Fast and Furious franchise and now Star Trek Beyond. So he's sort of our success story. And we've had lots of filmmakers that their first films were shown at VAF. And now they've gone on to make a name for themselves. So that's really exciting, as well as actors.
So I hear you have some special programming for this year's 20th anniversary. Tell us about that.
Well, for our 20th year, what's happened now and what's been happening online and with social commentary is how many Asian characters in film are being replaced or cast by Caucasian actors, and we're really upset that there's not enough diversity, especially for Asian actors. There's not enough opportunities for them, and 20 years later, we're still struggling with this. So what VAF is doing is we are doing the AIM3 Summit, and it's basically Asians in movies, media, and music. And we're trying to advocate, and we're bringing in, as one of our keynote speakers, William Yu, who was the media strategist that did Starring John Cho project, that got a lot of this conversation going about we need more Asian representation in film. We can be cast as leading characters, leading actors. So we're bringing them all in to try to make some real changes this year, and we have three sessions. The first one is Asians in comics, because a lot of the movies nowadays that's where they're finding the stories in comic books. So we want to make sure that our voices are there. Asians in music, and then Asians in movies and in film.
This is the first weekend, Grace, of November, right? And it's at the International Village Cineplex Odeon. Is that correct?
Yes.
So tell us, what are some of the highlights of this year's programming, Grace?
This year's festival runs at Cineplex Odeon International Village from November the 3rd to the 6th. And we're screening around 40 films. And essentially, we're looking at films that are pan-Asian in terms of origin and in terms of interest. Many of the films are in English because, as we're all speaking English now, for sure there would be. About 30% of the programming is in a language other than English. In terms of highlights, we are proud to have the world premiere of a BC-made documentary called All Our Father's Relations. And it looks at the relationship since the 19th century of Chinese Canadians with First Nations, particularly here in BC. And it focuses on the Grant family. They're a Musqueam Nation elders. And it talks about them growing up with a Chinese father and a First Nations mother and visiting Guangdong, China for the first time.
Well, there's a long history, and I think something we said for that. And I guess the focus is that mostly these are North American Asian filmmakers, and that's why it's mostly in English and so on. But and that's basically it, right?
That is basically the reason why. And although increasingly now what we're seeing are a lot of films that reflect the global village, films that are in more than one language. So in other words, we're speaking in English 1 second, we'll switch into Hindi or into Cantonese another second. And that just simply reflects the way a lot of people are now and a lot of people live now. So it doesn't compartmentalize us as much. It shows us as true global citizens.
Wow, 20th anniversary sounds really exciting. I'm so excited about being there. I've seen the festival grow, and hope to see you there, and the programming should be out pretty soon, right?
Yes, our official program announcement is October the 6th. Hope to see you all there.
Great. Well, thanks, Grace and Barbara, for being here talking to us about this 20th Anniversary Film Festival, and thank you for being here. This is IMTIAZ POPAT. Up next is Sherry Dougal with her health segment.
Hello everyone, welcome to my health segment on Access Television. Today we have a lovely lady, and we're going to talk about Tanis Hugel, and we're going to talk about dance therapy. Tanis, welcome to the studios.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. What is dance therapy, and where did it originate?
Well, dance therapy, it's a big question to answer, but dance therapy is the psychotherapeutic use of movement to promote healing, to promote the integration and well-being of the human being by bringing together their emotions and their bodies and their minds. So where did it begin? Well, it began, in the early part of the 20th century, when people that had studied with and danced with the early modern dance, the creators of modern dance in the United States and in Europe, became more interested in their teaching and then in their healing using dance and movement.
Because they had a lot of ritual happening at around that time too.
Well, yes, there was a rediscovery of ritual. And in fact, as I was telling you earlier, that dance therapy is really, it's the oldest modality of healing for human beings. It goes way back to early in human history, so thousands of years.
Before words, even babies in the stomach.
Yes, that's babies feel the therapeutic use of movement as they're in the womb, absolutely.
That's beautiful. And so what is involved in a session?
Well, sessions are very different depending on who's there, and also they change from session to session. So, but they always begin with the person arriving and then talking about what they're struggling with for that day or that time in their life, what their challenges are. And very early in the session, I'll direct the individual towards awareness of their bodies. So they might say, you know, I'm really frightened about my job interview tomorrow, or I'm really frightened about talking to my husband or my daughter. And so I'll encourage them to pay attention to what's going on in your body as you talk about being frightened. What are the sensations that you feel in your body that cause you to use that word? I'm frightened, frightened.
And
fear.
once they become more aware, what do you do next?
Well, I right away encourage them to pay attention to their sensations, and we talk about what those sensations are. So they might say, well, I feel tightness in my chest, or I feel tension in my neck. So I get them to describe that more fully. What is that tightness? Is it vibrating? Is it pulling? What does it feel like? Well, it feels like a fist is tightening. Oh, okay, well, how big is that fist that's tightening in your chest? And so we talk more and get them to pay attention to that image of the fist. I ask them to notice what's around the fist, or I might ask them to take their own fist and show me how much it's tightening. Then we're getting into a movement by having them show me the fist.
So we get into the movement. And how can we incorporate movement into our everyday life?
We incorporate movement into our everyday lives by just bringing our attention to our bodies. Because we are moving at every moment of our lives. Our body's primary language is movement. So just as we're sitting here and talking, we're both moving. Everybody, you know, it's just, so it's not so much incorporating movement into our lives, it's incorporating awareness of our bodies into our lives. Just by, you know, in a moment, just saying to ourselves, well, what's going on in my body? What does my body need? You know, what am I feeling? And where am I feeling that in my body? And what can I do to feel better? Perhaps I can take a breath. Or I can just pay attention to my feet on the floor and just focus on how I'm supported.
Because you were mentioning we tend to be so disconnected from ourselves.
Yes, our culture is completely disconnected from our bodies. I'll just go ahead and make that rash statement, but it's true.
I totally agree, and I think technology is a big part of it.
Technology hasn't helped, no.
And you have a few workshops coming up?
I do, yes.
And if you can tell us your website, that'll be great.
My website is awakeningbodywisdom.com.
And we have a series of workshops that starts on October the 7th. You're welcome to check it out. And we can talk so much more. Maybe I'll have to invite you again next time.
I'd love to. Thank you very
much. It's a
pleasure. Thank you very much, Sherry.
Thank you so much for coming to the studios.
Thank you, Sherry. You take good care.
Till next time, everyone. Take care.
Hi, welcome back. This is IMTIAZ POPAT, and Diwali is coming up in October, and I have here Rohit Chukani, artistic producer of the Diwali festival, and Janita is back from the Gujarati Cultural Society, talked about Navratri festival.
That's right.
So before this Diwali, this Navratri, 9 nights of Ras Garba. Tell us, what is Navratri?
So Navratri is 9 days of Garba and Puja. So we do divine Puja of Durga Ma for 9 days, starting on October 1st, and then we also celebrate on 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. All 5 of those days will be at the Taj Park Convention Center, starting at 8 p.m., and that's in Surrey. And then after that, we have the Sharad Purnima, which is our Garba, which we do at the Mahalakshmi Temple in Surrey. And that's on October 15th. And then we've got our Disco Dandiya, which is, of course, everybody loves Dandiya. That's, again, another art form of Gujarat. And that's where we dance with sticks. So that's a little bit more of a commercialized art form. And so it's just open. There's dancing, there's food, there's socializing. And it's just a huge party basically, and
Right.
it's at the Hard Rock Casino Theater on
Right.
the 22nd.
So Rohit, Navratri leads us into Diwali. And every year there's Diwali festival here in Vancouver. Tell us what are the highlights of this year's Diwali festival?
Well, we keep raising the bar every year at Diwali Fest, as you know, and this year is once again the biggest year of the festival. We start October 11th, and we're going to go all the way till November 30th. This is the longest Diwali Fest we've had. We're probably intruding on Christmas this year and starting at Halloween. But usual signature events that we have had at Diwali Fest come back. So we have the full day free event at the Roundhouse Community Center. We have a full day free event, Diwali Downtown in Surrey at the new Surrey City Hall. And then we are bringing back our very proprietary event, Chai House, this year. We do it every alternating years in a new territory, and we are doing it in a new partnership with the Evergreen Cultural Center in Coquitlam on November 20th. All the details are on our website, which is www.diwalifest.ca. And then we have the new attractions that we try to bring in new every year. And this year, we've got a full package of theater shows. I can just keep talking about them. It's like 5 of them. But the biggest highlight that I'm interested in talking about is called Pia Berupia, which is called, as you know, Nautanki. Nautanki is like a kind of a caravan, North Indian folk kind of dancing-based theater adaptation of the 12th Night. So we're bringing that from India. And then we have theater shows for young audiences in partnership with Carousel Theater for young people called Sultans of the Street. We are doing a more adult-oriented but a very important political piece based on human trafficking called Brothel Number 9 in partnership with Touchstone Theater. We have another show in partnership with the Culture. And then we wanted to do something with dance and fusion dance because Diwali is not just an Indian concept. Now we're in BC and we want to bring in other cultures. So we're doing an adaptation of the Magic Flute where India and Spain come together with CARON Flamenco doing the Spanish side of flamenco dance part of it, and then me directing with the team at Diwali Fest.
That's a lot. Starting with humble beginnings in Vancouver, now it's expanded to Surrey and Coquitlam. So that's really amazing with the Navratri Festival, Diwali Festival. Well, thank you both for being here. Culture is a very important part of Access Community Television here. So our next segment is famous songwriter and producer Earl Peach and his wife Barbara Jackson, the duo with Song Tree.
Maybe we should go to the sea again, just to see what love demands, and let it sweep away all the promises, all the palaces of sand.
Hi, I'm Ryan Irwin. This is Access TV in performance with Earl Peach and Barbara Jackson. Together, they are known as Song Tree. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, you guys are going to perform a song. What song are you going to perform?
Well, it's called Palaces of Sand, and it was written by Earl.
Quite a few years ago. It's on an album I did in 2008, but Barbara is also singing on it. And it's about relationships and the difficulties that they present. I guess the difficulty of being in love and being honest and being willing to go through it.
Great. Well, let's have a look.
How did we come to this? All of our pain laid bare, all of our tender bliss swept away as though it was never really there. Is it just the fear of drowning that makes us cling to sullen shoals of misery? Or could it be we just don't understand? Maybe we should go to the sea again, just to see what love demands, and let it sweep away all the promises, all the palaces of sand. How do we learn to love when we are so afraid of getting our hearts too deep in a debt that can never be repaid? Do we dive headlong into the waves, pretending everything will be alright, while holding tight to the dream of land? Maybe we should go to the sea again, just to see what love demands, and let it sweep away all the promises, all the palaces of sand. Maybe we should go to the sea again, just to see what love demands, and let it sweep away all the promises, all the palaces of sand.
Now, that was some great harmony. I really loved that harmony. What brought that about?
The harmony?
Yeah.
Well, Barbara and I started singing together actually in the late 1970s. That's just quite a while ago. And so, you know, we've developed a way of harmonizing our voices together that people have commented on for years. So it's always a way of finding harmonies that work for both of our voices.
Do you have any inspirations for harmony, Barbara?
Sure. I mean, I've been listening to music most of my life, and I love harmonies. So, and I've sung in a lot of choirs as well. And we used to walk around together singing, and that was fun. That's one of the ways that we started singing together.
Now, Earl, you wrote the song. What were the circumstances that led to its creation?
You know, songs don't necessarily come from a particular incident. It's more an agglomeration of images that come to you over time, and at a certain point they coalesce into a collection of ideas that seem to have a meaning. So I've written a lot about the sea. I think being on the coast has been a major influence on my life, and so it's affected the way I think about the sea as an image for our lives, and water in general.
What specific meaning does this song have for you?
It's talking about, I think, how at a certain point in a relationship, sometimes you want to give up because things just seem too hard. There's too much pain, too much history. And the suggestion is that sometimes you have to put away the history and just go back to the roots of what the relationship was about. And sometimes that's very difficult to define exactly, you know. So it's a question of how much you can give up and put aside so that you can get to the real stuff.
How long have you two known each other?
Since the late 70s, I was actually hosting a coffee house in Kitsilano. I was working at Kitsilano Neighborhood House, and I was...
So it was music that really brought you two together.
It's true,
It
yeah.
was.
And I had a big crush on Barbara for quite a few years, and then we didn't actually get together till 1984 when she hired me to work at Carnegie Center. And then that was about music too, since I was hosting 2 jams and a cabaret for every week for 16 years. Got to know a lot of musicians in downtown Eastside, but that program, she started.
More or less. And then I had to replace myself because I had other obligations at Carnegie as a staff person, so that's when I hired him to replace me hosting that cabaret.
Of course, we didn't get together till she stopped being my boss.
Exactly.
Right. Of course.
Now, during your time at Carnegie, what influences did you draw from that experience?
You can't spend any time in the downtown east side without having your worldview changed, you know? When I walked into that neighborhood, I was afraid because I didn't know people living in poverty. I grew up in a middle-class household myself, you know, fairly well-fed, and I made all the usual kind of stupid assumptions about people until I got to know a lot of people in the downtown east side and understood that there are a lot of folks living there who are incredibly talented and also mutually supportive. It's an amazing neighborhood, amazing community. And there are people who are world-class artists in their own right. You know, there's Bud Osborne was a poet in the downtown east side whose poetry still moves me deeply every time I read it. So it was a huge learning experience for me, and it still is when I go there.
Barbara, you've been there longer than Earl. What's changed?
Well, I'm not directly working there now, but when I first started working at Carnegie, it was mostly single older men who were coming into Carnegie as basically a refuge. So we kind of treated it as a living room for the folks that lived there. And it was also an alternative to the bars because otherwise most of the community space was found in the bars. And a lot of these, most of the people were, a lot of them were older men who basically had kind of burned their bodies out through logging and fishing, and some of them were separated from their families, so they were lonely, and they had turned to alcohol, so there was a lot of alcoholism. There weren't any drugs like there are now.
That all changed.
It was so it was a sense of community and really a sense of family. And I had the pleasure of working at Carnegie in the first couple of years of it opening, and then I stayed there longer, but being there at the beginning was really exciting because it was such a sense of idealism and family and community in the work that we were doing together and in the work we were doing for the community.
Right, and you know, I think we were both still working at Carnegie when the first wave of heroin came into the neighborhood. That was shortly after that new crew came into power in Burma and started calling it Myanmar. But for 9 months after that, there was this like flood of cheap heroin, and people started dropping like flies. There were 350 overdose deaths a year in the downtown east side for 10 years, and it barely made page 10 in the Vancouver Sun. And you know, I started to see a lot of the attitudes of the cops at that time toward people in the downtown east side, or they would just take people in the alley and beat the crap out of them just for a lark. And you know, this was right around the time that women were going missing in the downtown east side as well, many of them, and there were lots of rumors about the police and the Hells Angels kind of hanging out together, having little tete-a-tete sessions. So the neighborhood went through some pretty vicious and overwhelming paroxysms of pain, right? And so I think the culmination of that was the creation of Insight. And Bud was largely, in many ways, he and some other people were largely responsible for pushing for that. So it was a huge victory for folks in that neighborhood. But also, there were other victories like the creation of Crab Park, which is now called Portside Park. But people occupied that space for weeks until they could actually get the Parks Board to agree to make it a public space for people in the neighborhood. And the shutting down of the liquor store at Main and Hastings. And, it's a pretty interesting neighborhood.
Yeah. Now you wrote an opera about the neighborhood, the Downtown East Side Opera.
Well, I wrote the music, but the book was written by Downtown East Side writers. And so there was a lot of interplay back and forth. They were sending me lyrics, and while we were driving east, actually, I'd write something and send it to them. So that was pretty great. And we produced that opera 3 times, featuring singers from the Downtown East Side, musicians from the Downtown East Side. And we did it once at Carnegie, once at the Fire Hall, and once at St. James Community Square, and each time to packed houses. And it was a pretty great event. Yeah.
Well, in the future, with you two together, what kind of music would you like to produce? What kind of a legacy would you like to leave behind?
That's a pretty good question.
Yeah. Well, we made one CD in 2010, that was kind of a, not a culmination exactly, but I hadn't really done any professional recording before, so it was just very exciting for me to put that CD together with the songs that we've been singing for over 20 years together. And so I feel like that's a little bit of a legacy already, just in terms of, but
We have been talking about doing some more recording recently.
We'll do some more recording. But it's also that we really both feel that music is a way for people to tell stories, but also a way for people to get together. It's very healing. I'm actually a counselor now, so I often try to use music and sound, and I teach workshops about working with chronic pain and healing. And so just the power of music to not only tell stories and tell our own stories and other people's stories and bring people together, but also to really have a profoundly healing effect on the body and the spirit. So we'd like to continue doing that.
I hope that you do. It was great to have you guys on today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on. And I hope you have a great day.
Up next is Christine Blanchett, one of our community producers, in conversation with Dave Cressman, owner of Distance RUNWARE, about running tips.
Joining me on Run With It is avid competitive runner and owner of Distance RUNWARE is Dave Cressman. Welcome to Run With It.
Thanks, Christine, for having me.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to ask you about your running background.
Well, it's fairly diverse. So I started running as a young boy at 11 years old, and my first race was actually a 20-kilometer road race, which I generally don't recommend, and I don't encourage my own daughters to run that far yet either. But it started the ball rolling, and since then I haven't been able to shake it, and I've really enjoyed my time so far. We get a lot of beginners in the store, and the thing with beginners is there aren't a lot of entry points. And what I mean by that, there are lots of clinics to sign up for, but they don't have that reference point of how fast they are or how far they can run. And so joining a group that is going to run at a certain pace is somewhat difficult, because they'll be able to do that for the first half of the run, and then as they fatigue, naturally your form starts to deteriorate as well. And that's where most of the running related injuries start to creep in, because people run badly when they're tired, which means they're putting more impact on their body, and then they're achy, and then they don't want to do it the next day. So it's really about creating a good habit. And I much prefer and recommend to people that they're better off to run 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week, than try and knock off a 45-minute run once or twice a week. What we find with long-time runners is they've been doing it a lot, but they haven't had a lot of diversity in how they've been training. So they generally have their habit figured out, right? On Monday I do this run, and on Tuesday I do this, and I run with so-and-so on the long days, and so forth. But what I find quite common is running too fast, too often. You know, the person that's running the same way around, the seawall in the same shoe at the same pace 5 days a week is probably going to be more likely to get injured than the person that's doing a lot of different things with their running, right? More pace differential, more terrain differential, and even mixing up the types of footwear that they choose to run in.
Great information. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. This is a lot of fun.
So that's a wrap. Lots of festivals in this show, Molly.
Highlights on the Diwali were very interesting. What an evolution of arts, and it's really become a West Coast festival too. I love it.
So what are we going out with?
We're going to bring some footage of last year's Heart in the City Festival, highlights from the Tracks Symposium that Terry Hunter and Stephen Lytton spoke of. And we also want to invite you to tell us your story. If you have something you'd like to rant or rave about, we can handle the truth here on Access TV. So get in touch. On behalf of our volunteer cast and crew, we thank you for your attention today. I'm Molly CARON.
And IMTIAZ POPAT.
grandfather said, we introduce ourselves so we know where things come from, not to separate us, but to try to find ways to link together.
Our peoples are still primarily oral societies, so protocol happens face-to-face in front of witnesses, in private ceremonies, public events, in our homes every day, in our relationships every day, over kitchen tables.
In large part, for me, that's what this project, Dances of Resistance, was about, is about taking art to as many places as we could. Knowing that art was ripped out of our communities through the prohibition and various acts over the last 100 or 200 years.
And I have to admit that when I first met her, I was thinking to myself, here we go again. Because she kept coming back and she seemed to genuinely be interested in our stories and in the history of the area and of the tribe, I started to trust her. I began to establish a trust relationship with her. And that was the first step.
Again, Margaret and I have worked much like Gawagani, starting quite frankly and humbly from our respective places across this cultural abyss, knowing it's not a matter, you can't just slam them together. And the dialogue began through movement.
One of the principles that we really stuck with, and Crystal was so gentle and yet firm in her insistence that we not look into stories about what other people did or other people do. It was always grounded in personal understanding, our own lived histories, and really our own learning.
Something that Peter said about not silencing voices, I think this is something to consider about when we think of reconciliation, that it's not only right now, but it's for our ancestors, it's for our relations, it's for our future generations as well.